You know, I can talk about all these subjects in a much more simple and straightforward matter. Gay people, libertarians, white supremacists, everything. The law comes down to four qualities: what you ought to do, what you ought not to do, who you are, and what you're doing. That's what this is all about. Gay rights are either about what people are doing in their bedroom, and they have a right to do that, or who they are as people. They can't seem to decide which one they want to go with, because that would be inconvenient to cling to one. And Western society is primarily about who you are and what you're doing, rather than what you ought to be doing or what you ought not to be doing. And there's a difference between what you're doing and what you ought to be doing. What you ought to be doing is having public facilities that give education to children. What you ought to be doing is having free health care. What you ought to be doing is providing work, stable work, for every individual. Those are things you ought to be doing. What you are doing is probably, in your parents' basement, smoking weed with your friends, jacking each other off or whatever. Or looking at porn online, or some other bullshit. And I'm not saying that you don't have a right to do those things, but that isn't what political struggle is about. That's not what we fight for. That's not why blood has been shed for all these years throughout human existence for. We don't need fucking laws to protect us from that. We need laws to protect us with our real rights so that we can be equipped to have those kinds of freedoms. If we had proper education and proper health care and proper representation, then we wouldn't have to worry about those things. But then it comes back to who you are. And that's what it's all about. It's all about fucking identity politics. It's all about who you are and who you know. And that's wrong. That's not what even American government was founded upon. That's why we have a constitution. What does the Constitution do? It strictly states what the government ought not to do. More so than even what the people are entitled to, i.e. what they ought to do. So, that's America's foundation. America's foundation was a restriction on government. And libertarians love to cling to that, but they forget the fact that government does not just have to be something they conveniently think it is. It's not simply a public institution. Anyone who thinks they can govern me has fallen into the purviews of government. There are legitimate governments, as our state. There are illegitimate governments, i.e. moderators, vigilantes, criminals, whatever you want to call them. The point is that these negative rights are laid down flat. No one has the right to restrict my freedom of speech, my freedom to assemble, my freedom to own a gun, those kinds of things. And yet, every day, people do. Because of states' rights, there are things like waiting periods, or I can't get a gun if I have a felony, or some other bullshit. If this was a more racist culture, black people wouldn't be able to own guns. Women would not be able to own guns. Maybe even so-called gay people would not be able to own guns. Don't act like it could not happen. So this is what it comes down to. The fact that it's become more so about whether or not I fit into the criteria to have rights as an identity, rather than, no, these are the rights I have, you do not have a right to infringe upon them. And that's terrible. That's what this has come down to. The fact that we are not discussing the rights in and of themselves anymore. We are discussing where our place is on the social ladder, on the pecking order. That's fascism. That is authentic fascism. That is Nazism. And, some people are going to invoke Godwin's law here, but what the fuck do you think National Socialism was? Do you think it was just a bunch of guys wearing cool symbols, stepping around, killing Jews? That was a part of it, but it was more than that. That's why it was so infamous for its villainy. We didn't just hate Nazis because they made great, colorful villains on Indiana Jones films. We hated them for what they represented. That there was one class of people that was strictly better than another class of people. And they had this big list of who was better than whom. And they had a humongous pecking order. That's why we hated them. That's why the communists hated them. That's why the liberal capitalists hated them. That's why the moderates hated them. That's why we all banded together to hang them. Because no one benefited from that. Because it's always fluctuating who owns the cultural hegemony. But yet people have forgotten that. And now it's all about bullshit. Even the whole counter-argument type bullshit. Men's rights, for example. I have friends that are MRAs, but you know what? I think it's pretty stupid. Not because it isn't true what they say, that men are lower on the pecking order. That much is obvious. But you're forgetting the point. It isn't about your rights as a man or as a woman. It's about your rights. You have rights. And I understand that they cannot bring that argument to modern imperialist society because people just don't want to get it. But it doesn't stop it from being true. The fact is, they're not defending rights as individuals, they're defending rights as men. And that might be their only option. It's reactionary, but it might be necessary, because what other choice do you have living in an imperialist society? Because you're not able to discuss this issue as individuals, as we ought not to have laws that discriminate against anybody, or we ought to do things that benefit everyone equally. Whatever kind of social program women are entitled to, men are entitled to, and vice versa. If there is some employment discrimination going on, then those discriminators should be punished, whether or not it's against men or against women. And in most cases, it's against women. I give women that much. I don't care what the MRA say. Women get treated like shit in the workplace. I've seen it happen. So that's what this comes down to. It comes down to group mentality rather than a social structure that benefits everybody. That's why I don't understand why so many people are so vehemently opposed to communism. Because, oh, you just think about the group, you don't think about the individual. But meanwhile, they don't mind thinking about the group when it comes to their penis or their vagina or who they're humping or the color of their skin or some other bullshit. And that's what engages class war. Class war isn't simply rich versus poor, but that's ultimately what it comes down to. The point is, class war is all this bullshit of conflict internally between Class A and Class B. And who do you think invents those classes? The 1%. Why would they do that? Because they benefit from it. Because at the end of the day, you're paying attention to Class A or Class B instead of the fucking 1%. The 1% make a lot of money doing that. The 1% create this organized chaos so that they can continue to have power, and at the same time you are blindsided by your more petty concerns. You're worried about your job. You're worried about your house. You're worried about your self-image. And you're not worrying about the fact that these motherfuckers are living in goddamn mansions on some uncharted island while you're having to dig ditches 6 days a week. That's what you should be worried about. Not whether or not as a black man or as a gay man or as a woman or as whatever, you're getting gypped out of what little minuscule of benefits happen to those of the higher end of the pecking order. Because you know what? Despite having a penis, I don't have a whole lot. I don't have anything more than I probably would as a woman. Would I say my life would be better as a woman or worse? No. Because it would be different. It would certainly be a different experience, as most likely I would be an ugly woman. And therefore my life would be treated more terribly in some regards. As much as people make fun of me for my appearance now, could you only imagine if I was a woman? My God, there would be an unending flood of bullshit. So, no, I am not going to say that women have it better than me. Nor am I going to say that I have it better than women simply because of my dick. What I am going to say is that all of this is perpetuated by an elite few who benefit from me looking at women with envy or them looking at me with envy over what we are perceived to have as a class struggle. So, that's why I don't support gay rights. And I am glad that gays are trolling 4chan, and I wish they would do it more often. I wish gays would see that this fight is as much theirs as it is mine. Gays can be discriminated against on any forum the forum wishes. It just so happens that most forums are run by sexual deviants like Richard the Rapist Bueller or Steve the Child Killer, and that's why usually gays are not discriminated against. Because whatever gay shit you're doing is probably nothing compared to the extremely gay shit that they're doing. they're molesting children. You're having consensual sex with, like, 3 guys at the same time. It's filthy, it's disease-ridden, it's wrong, but it's nowhere near as bad or as raunchy or as disturbing. And they know that. You know that. So that's why I don't think gays are attacking moderators harder. Because I think they see moderators as more on their side than on my side, I guess. I don't know how... that sounded better in my head. My point is that, you know, they should be defending the idea of freedom of speech more so than whether or not they're being discriminated against as an identity. Because who you fuck does not define what you are entitled to as a human being. And whether or not you define yourself by that makes no difference. It's no imperative to society to say that, oh, you're this, so therefore you're entitled to that. It doesn't work that way. It works that way because those freedoms are objective. Those freedoms are absolute. So either you have those freedoms or you don't. No one is suggesting that you do not have the right to fuck who you want to fuck. But a lot of people are saying that who you fuck does not define your freedoms. There is a difference. A can sometimes equal B, but B cannot equal A. That's what it comes down to. And I don't think the LGBT or white supremacists or libertarians or any of those other reactionary positions quite understand that. And that's what aggravates the hell out of me. And that's why I can't stand the fact that all these liberals get to call themselves left-leaning, because they don't get it. They don't get what this is about. They don't get that this isn't about their issues as an identity. That's part of the equation of our class struggle to begin with. And, you know, we're losing real freedoms here. We have so much potential in the internet alone, and it's being restricted by fucking twat moderators that don't appreciate us as human beings, as individuals entitled to these objective rights. And nobody is speaking up for it. Nobody on the right, nobody on the left. I expect the right not to, but it's the principle of the matter. It's the principle of the matter that nobody is thinking about that, because they're too entwined with their bullshit about whether or not the white race is getting gypped. The white race is almost extinct. The white race is a bunch of fucking panda bears that is not reproducing fast enough, and boo-hoo-hoo. Oh, I'm gay, poor me. I get discriminated against in vague and enormous ways. Oh, I'm a woman. I get discriminated against in the workplace. Oh, I'm a man. I get discriminated against in the courtroom. Wah, wah, wah. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it, and I just wish people would understand that it's about the rights. It's about the principle. It's not about who you are. Nobody gives a fuck who you are. That's why we have identity politics, because nobody respects you as an individual. They don't say you, as a living being who can think and can feel and can experience, have those rights. No, they're classifying you by your identities as male, as Hispanic, as Asian, as Jewish, and they're throwing those labels out there because they need something to define you, because they don't give a fuck about your name, they don't give a fuck about your life, what you've done, and that's identity politics. That's nationalism. And why are so many people behind that? Especially people that are supposedly on the left. So that's what I wanted to break down. The fact that anything involving the law, whether or not it's just social rule or actual imposed laws, comes down to what you ought to be doing, what you ought not to be doing, who you are, or what you're doing. And right now, we're too focused on what we're doing, especially in the bedroom, and who we are as an identity. So that's really all I have to say. You think about that. If you think I could have worded that better, you go ahead and try to reinterpret the video for me. You know, I don't script this. I just say it straight out of my head. See you later.